Minus 40 degrees, no fire yet, no shelter built, just skin and the dark coming fast. This was Tuesday, every Tuesday, for 100,000 years, and somehow your ancestors did not just survive it, they thrived in it. They raised children in it. They walked out of Africa and into the coldest environment a human body had ever faced, with no technology you would recognize as technology at all. How? 40,000 years ago, in what is now Russia, humans were living above the Arctic Circle. Temperatures regularly dropped below minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. No modern human, dropped into that environment naked, survives more than a few hours. They did not just survive. Archaeological sites like Mammoth Kuria show sustained human habitation in this environment for generations. So the question is not whether they survived winter. The question is what they knew that we have almost entirely forgotten. The first answer is not fire, it is fat. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham of Harvard University has studied how early human diets shifted dramatically before major cold climate migrations. Ancient hunters did not target lean meat. They targeted fat, bone marrow, organ fat, blubber, wherever it was available. This was not about taste. Fat contains more than double the calories of protein per gram, and unlike protein, it does not strain the kidneys when consumed in extreme quantities. In brutal cold, the human body burns calories at a staggering rate just to maintain core temperature. A diet of pure lean meat in that environment can actually kill you through a condition called protein poisoning, sometimes referred to as rabbit starvation. Ancient humans in cold climates knew this instinctively, or learned it through generations of trial and fatal error. They prioritized fat above all else. Some Arctic adapted populations today still derive more than 70% of their caloric intake from fat. Then there is clothing. And this is where the archaeological record gets genuinely stunning. For decades, researchers assumed Neanderthals went extinct, partly because they lacked sophisticated clothing technology. Homo sapiens, meanwhile, had something Neanderthals apparently did not: the eyed needle. Archaeologist Olga Sofer has studied needle technology at sites across Ice Age Europe. These needles, some dated to over 40,000 years old, were fine enough to sew tightly fitted, layered garments, not just draped hides, but tailored clothing with multiple layers trapping insulating air between them. This is the same principle modern Arctic gear uses today. Layered insulation, not just thickness, is what keeps a body alive at extreme temperatures. Ancient humans figured this out using bone needles and sinew thread, tens of thousands of years before synthetic fabric existed. But clothing and diet alone do not explain the coldest survival stories in human history. For that, you need shelter. And ancient shelter technology was far a stranger and far smarter than most people assume. At sites like Mezherik in Ukraine, archaeologists discovered something remarkable: houses built almost entirely from mammoth bones, not wood, not stone. Bone. In a landscape with almost no trees, ancient humans used the skeletal remains of massive animals as a structural building material. Skulls stacked as foundation walls. Tusks curved into archways. The bones were then covered with hides, creating a shelter that could withstand brutal wind and cold, using materials scavenged entirely from their environment. Archaeologist Olga Sofer, who has extensively studied these sites, describes them as evidence of extraordinary planning. These were not desperate, improvised shelters. The bones were selected, sorted, and arranged with clear structural intention. Some of these dwellings show evidence of having been used and rebuilt across multiple generations. Inside these shelters, fire changed everything, but not in the simple way most people imagine. Fire was not just for warmth. It was for processing food into a form the body could extract more calories from. Cooked fat and marrow release significantly more usable energy than raw. In an environment where every calorie mattered for survival, fire functioned as a caloric multiplier, not just a comfort. There's also growing evidence that ancient cold climate humans understood something modern science only recently confirmed: brown fat activation. Unlike regular white fat, brown fat generates heat directly by burning calories rather than storing them. Modern research shows that repeated cold exposure can increase brown fat activity in the human body over time. Populations that lived in extreme cold for generations may have developed enhanced brown fat function as a biological adaptation, not just a behavioral one. In other words, cold itself may have reshaped human physiology at a cellular level, layered on top of every cultural and technological adaptation already in play. Genetic studies of populations with long histories in extreme cold environments, including some Siberian and Inuit populations, have identified specific gene variants linked to enhanced fat metabolism and heat generation. Evolution was not just watching from the sidelines, it was actively reshaping the human body in real time, generation by generation, in response to a threat that killed anyone who could not adapt. Every layer of clothing sewn with a bone needle, every fire built inside a mammoth bone shelter, every strip of fat prioritized over lean meat. These were not primitive survival tricks, they were an integrated system. Diet, technology, architecture, and biology all working together, refined over tens of thousands of years by people who had absolutely no room for error. You're only here reading this because none of them made a fatal mistake. The cold did not spare the careless, and your ancestors were never careless.